Hello, everyone. We are going to write a story today called Mind the Store. I got a few notes written down, and we'll see if we can knock this out and make it into a decent story that people actually would want to read. All right, so Mind the Store is the name of the story. It's going to be a little bit of a fantasy story, so let's go. You mind Stovington. No, let's make it an OR. Storvington. You mind Storvington. Okay. You mind Storvington, son. Ted's dad fumbled with the clasp to his cloak. And he'll mind the store. Ted's mother finally helped the man gain the clasp. They looked, the pair, in their weathered leather armor. Without much else to say, they left, and the bell over the door rang twice. Ted took a deep breath and swallowed twice. He turned to the troll, who barely showed his scruffy head above the countertop. All right. Ted said, must do something else here. The knife clacked against the cutting board. At Stovington's. Oh, it starts with an R. Storvington's eye level. What can I do to... Hold on, let me put in the quotation and then get the M dash. What can I do to just sweep, boy? Sweep and don't bump me. Sweep and don't distract me. Sweep and don't get any dust over here on these. Do another M dash. I got it. I got it. Shut up and sweep. You'll be a good helper. Storvington grunted. It was probably as close to a joke as the troll could get. His family trusted the troll, and Ted obeyed his parents usually. Before he could take up the broom for any sweeping, the bell over the door rang from the first customer since Ted's parents had both left for the battle. A wizard with a long gray beard and flowing purple robes. A wizard with a long gray beard and flowing purple robes swept into the store and bent up and down, looking from side to side at the jars of dried ingredients. Had to write the word ingredients over and over again for a recipe book I ghost wrote this week. Had to finish the whole thing in just a few days. Alright. Up and down, side to side of the jars of dried ingredients. Ted smirked. His parents were both magic users, and his father railed against purple robes. Only amateurs. Let me check the spelling on that. Only amateurs wore purple robes. Real magic users wore plain leather and tried to hide their art, except when they had to be revealed. Why would any respectable wizard wear purple and make himself a target to the archers and warriors on the field of... Alright, let me... The wizard... Let's say the purple wizard. Purple wizard rapped on Ted's forehead with his knuckles like the boy was made of wood. Ted blinked and backed up a step as the old man stared over his half glasses at the boy. "What? Sorry. Can I help you, sir?" Fire toads. The wizard's thin voice took on an edge. "I said, do you have them?" "We do." Ted turned his chin to his shoulder. "Storvington, do you want to get the fire toads for our customer here? I want you to not interrupt while I'm slicing dragon dung." The troll said, "I'd like to have my fingers unmelted in the morning. Can you pick up the jar yourself?" Question. "I can, but it isn't just sweeping, so I didn't want to assume that I..." Got a lot of interrupting going on here. "Not now, boy." Let me just... Muscles along Ted's closed jaws worked as he yanked the jar off the shelf and held it out. The wizard lifted and then dropped his glasses. "These are dried." "They always come dried," Ted said. "Yes, right. Right. I knew that. I did." Ted managed not to roll his eyes, but forced a smile. The jar jar is 5 gold. Might not want the whole jar. That's how we sell them. Fine, fine boy. But I'll not buy anything without seeing and handling it for myself. Ted referenced the troll as the knife clacked the board, adding another paper thin slice of dragon dung to the stack. The boy set up on the other end of the counter and opened the jar. He tipped it on its side so that the dried toads rolled to the mouth. Say glass mouth. He caught the fumes and gagged. Ted stepped away and bent over. He sneezed twice and his eyes watered blind. As he rubbed his face on his sleeves, he heard a series of crackles and pops. Strovington cursed in the language of his people. The only troll words Ted knew were the bad ones, so he knew right away something was wrong. Through his leaking eyes, he saw that the wizard had dumped a few toads onto the wooden counter where they scorched scars in the fine wood and gathered smoke in the ceiling. The wizard held up both his bony hands and cried out, "The boy did it." Ted took up a bucket of water and repeated the troll curses under his breath. No. I've misspelled this guy's name a couple times. I'm gonna need to fix it in editing. Storvington yelled, but Ted threw the water. What didn't wash the toads off the counter splashed into the jar. A flash of flame, and then the glass exploded. It embedded in the walls and missed Ted by only a miracle. Fire spiraled up from the toads on the floor, and then they hopped toward the door, leaving burning patches everywhere they landed. The troll threw a scaly blanket over the dung and grabbed another as he ran around the other end of the counter as fast as his stubby legs would allow. The bell over the door rang again. Storvington worked to smother the fire toads before they could hop outside. The hag witch, with hair and furry robes hanging off her frame like seaweed, dodged around the troll and the burning patches as if nothing were amiss. She ran her green fingers over the jars and finally shouted over the commotion, "I'm looking for fresh confectioner's slimes. It'll be a minute. Storvington." Let me put that a period and put him having an action. "It'll be a minute." Storvington elbowed the purple wizard aside to staunch the burning water puddled on the ruined counter. "I'm in a bit of a hurry," she said. "Ted," the troll growled. The boy couldn't tell if Storvington was saying his name in frustration or telling him to handle the hag. Ted sighed and fetched the jar of powdered confectioner's slimes from the shelf. She held it aloft in the dying fires around the smoky store. Powdered? Ted was about to mark, but he didn't know if confectioner's slimes were always powdered. He told her what he did know. My parents prepare it fresh daily. Powdered, though. She opened the lid and licked a finger with her bright green tongue. She took up the smallest bit of powder that way and tasted it. She actually smacked her lips. Very fresh. 3 silver, like always. Yes, Ted said. She dug in her filthy robes, and Ted was about to tell her to just leave it on whatever dry or unburned spot on the counter she could find. But then the troll shouted. Don't open that in heat or smoke. Ted didn't understand. The hag witch's eyes grew wide as she tried to close the jar. The slime powder melted and grew. It escaped the closing edges, and the jar slipped from her grasp. It bounced twice, but then never touched the floor again as the slime spread everywhere out from under it. It climbed the shelves and covered the other jars. It would have swallowed Ted too, except for the hag witch's reflexes. She grabbed the boy up and moved with him behind the counter in a flash. Oh dear. Well, of course, I will pay for all of that. Right. The door burst open so hard that the bell clonked instead of ringing. A man with a broad hat and a ridiculously long plume stepped in with a flourish. Guild inspector he announced. Here for the monthly. That's as much as he got out. The purple wizard ducked his head and slipped by the gobstopped inspector. I can explain. Dorvington said. The slime pushed aside the scaled blanket and sizzled against the slices of dragon's dung. The troll cursed again and started searching the shelves for the right ingredients to stop the reaction. The inspector attended to Ted, who appeared to be the only one free. This will not look good, no matter how I write it up. Where are your parents, boy? Ted coughed, mostly from the smoke, and said, "Battle. Right, of course. But they should have closed the store. No magic users present." He made a mark on his parchment. The troll threw purple powder on the dung and slime. The growing blister of mush started to shrink. I'm a licensed... Okay, I don't even think I'm close enough to get that right. Okay, licensed surrogate the guild inspector huffed and made another mark. Bang up job you're doing. The inspector turned to the shelves not being eaten by slime. Are these stored properly? Storvington mixed more purple goo behind the counter as he snapped. Ted. The boy looked for a path through the spreading slime. I've got you, the hag witch said. She carried him across the slime and set him down next to the inspector. Ted turned to say thank you, but she was already helping the troll attack the slime with the purple mixture. Boy, yes sir. These, are they stored properly? Yes, everything is. The inspector made a show of looking over his shoulder and then Street 5. Jay, what did you teach prior to becoming a full-time writer, if you don't mind me asking? No, that's fine. I actually taught a few different things. I got a middle grades degree, but I ended up teaching elementary first. So I taught fourth grade for about 4 years back in the 90s, and then followed that up with 4 years of fifth grade. All that was in the state of Georgia. Then No Child Left Behind came around, and you had to take a test and get certified in every subject you taught. And since I taught elementary, I went ahead and took tests in every subject because I already had that. I was teaching every subject, being an elementary teacher. And so I had every subject on my certificate. And then we moved to South Carolina and I started teaching middle school. So most teachers, middle school teachers, have one, two, maybe three subjects on their certificate, but I had all of them. So I could teach any subject, any grade level, which is great for getting a teaching job. But once you have the teaching job, then I was everywhere. And so I was willing to teach wherever they wanted me to. So every year I ended up teaching a different grade and different subject. The inspector made a show of looking over his shoulder and then scratched on his parchment. I am all over the place here. All right, on his parchment, a little more. Open them. The inspector said. Which ones, sir? These three. There we go. But they should make a pop when opened. Can I do them one at a I'm ready to fail your store, boy. All three now. Ted held his breath as he opened the. All right, that's fantastic. You have a well-rounded educator experience, and said you enjoyed the teaching history. History is a passion of yours outside of writing. It really is. It's kind of that theory of like you really understand something once you have to teach it to somebody else. But I loved teaching American history, and ancient history was very fascinating to me too. And I always felt maybe it was because it was so close to stories. So like really good history is just a really interesting story, and it's the interesting bits that get saved up and people tell, and then somewhere along the way, as we're putting them into textbooks, especially for younger and younger learners, the bits of history become less and less interesting. So I always enjoyed kind of bringing the excitement back into some of those stories, and they've always been a good source for me for polling story ideas. So following like how Roman emperors conducted themselves, especially some of the less well-known ones, or emperors of lesser-known empires, even stories from the Bible and so forth. All of those tend to be really good sources of drama for sometimes making a backdrop for a story or repurposing something that happened in history to fit your characters in just about any genre of story. So I really love history in particular. And for a long time, most of the reading I did outside of my own writing was nonfiction history, and I think it fed into my storytelling a good bit. In more recent years, I've read a lot more fiction, especially among indie writers who are doing some really interesting stuff. But I've always loved studying history separately. I've always found it interesting, and especially if I'm researching for a story, I have to be careful because I'll end up down all sorts of rabbit holes, just studying random people and obscure events in time, and especially obscure events that had possibly had big impacts other places. So all of that stuff fascinates me a lot, and especially the strange and the ironic and the unusual connections between people, and especially if you can get like a historic figure that we know pretty well, but then you find some unusual fact about them. I'm writing a time travel series for middle schoolers. I got 3 books out on that Time Travel Academy, and I'm working on the 4th one now. And it was one of the things they went back in time for was the Wright brothers. So they're going back at different points in history, and of course there's always a subplot about the bad guy they're trying to keep from changing history. But there was a one of the significant moments in the Wright brothers' history was that one of them got really hurt in a hockey accident when he was young, and didn't end up going to college, and it kind of derailed his life. But he spent time studying birds, and then they got into making bicycles, and then they started playing with wind tunnels, and all of this stuff led to them creating what they created, partly because this one brother didn't end up going to college. And the kid that he ended up in a conflict with, that kind of busted up his face so bad that he, had to be homebound for a while, was a guy named Oliver Crook Howe, I believe I got that name in order. And then Oliver Crook Howe, as a kid, had like a rotten teeth, and of course they gave him cocaine to solve it. It kind of messed up his head, and he ended up becoming a doctor. But then he was also the most prolific serial killer in the history of Ohio, I believe, and ended up killing all these people. And the last people he killed was his own family, because they were trying to sell his family home, so he kind of burned it down with them inside it, and ended up going to prison then, but had never gotten caught because he kept moving, and all the deaths appeared to be medical accidents or whatever. And so this serial killer essentially was significant to the invention of the airplane, because he changed the course of the Wright brothers' lives. So like I'll get caught up in something like that. I actually have it on. I have the guy's name on a board behind me, because I'm certain that I want to write a short story specifically about that. Of course, I couldn't include all that in the middle grades telling of a historic event back there, but I got caught up in that, and so I'm constantly finding strange tales like that in history, and it's always something that fascinates me a great deal. Ted held his breath as he opened the red. I wrote some of this stuff down so I wouldn't have to make it up on the spot. The red bips, the blue Hillers, and the yellow Slims. Storvington shouted, "Don't open those all at..." Alright, got a lot of interruptions in this tale here. Storvington, with the M dashes, the characters keep interrupting each other. Storvington shouted, "Don't open those all at..." Ted ducked before the troll could finish, and the 3 ingredients rocketed around the room. The inspector's hat. Say fancy hat. Tore to pieces. He would have lost his head too if the kindly hag witch hadn't pulled him to the ground. The troll grumbled out all the human curse words as he finished containing the slime and set about neutralizing the bips, pillars, and slims. When it was all over, Alright, so I think I got the recording and the stream back on. Alright, when it was all over, the inspector started to threaten Ted's family and their business with closure and doom. Storvington listened a while. When the man stopped for a breath, the troll pointed out that the inspector had called for the 3 jars opened at once. The hag witch said she was a witness to it. The man mumbled something about ruining their reputations. But Storvington pointed out that trolls and hag witches didn't care much about reputation. The guild inspector decided to leave a note that he'd return in 2 weeks for a proper inspection. So the hidden truth, what your preferred way that you would like me to purchase. You just go on Amazon and buy the paperback or the ebook. We all get paid either way. I appreciate you grabbing that one up. I think it's a good one. Kind of shows what Armand and I can both do. So yeah, I don't have that one on my own website because the publisher is selling it. But I appreciate you being willing to buy that up. That'd be cool. Alright, the guild inspector decided to leave a note that he'd return in 2 weeks for a proper inspection. The hag witch offered to help clean up, but Storvington turned her down firmly. She left some silver for her part of the trouble. Ted had a lot of sweeping to do. The store, aside from the counter and some staining on the ceiling, looked pretty good when Ted's parents returned from battle that evening. Ted's father had scorch marks up one side of his cloak and through his hair. Ted's mother appeared tired, but otherwise unharmed. I don't want to talk about it, Ted's father said as he leaned on the counter. He scanned the wood up and down, but said nothing about the damages. His mother looked over the shelves. How much did you sell today? Storvington pressed his fur hat down on his head and said, "We'll need to discuss an inventory problem in the morning." Also, the inspector agreed to return in a couple weeks. The bell rang twice, and the troll was off to his cottage for a late supper. Ted took his attention from the door. Let's say shifted his attention from the door. Ted shifted his attention from the door and found both his parents staring down at him. He tried to hold out, but then said, "Everybody kept opening things. There was a lot of fire and slime, but Storvington got it under control, and I helped sweep up. Ted's father shook his head. There was a lot of fire. Everywhere today. Let's eat so I can go to bed. With that, the family extinguished the lanterns and went home. Alright, I'm not positive that's the best ending, but it'll be something around there. So that worked out okay. I've had the title Mind the Store sitting on my board for a while with some different ideas of what it meant. I've written a couple fantasy stories here on Twitch recently, and they've always kind of been a little bit leaned a little bit towards humor and tongue-in-cheek and stuff, so I thought something like this would be good. I like that the troll is somebody who runs the store and knows what he's doing. I like that the hag witch turns out to be a real decent human being and isn't looking for any trouble. That there's a magic guild that kind of runs small business inspections and nobody likes them. And for whatever reason in this particular world, the color purple is something that pretender wizards will wear, and real wizards try to disguise who they are when they're about their work. So all that kind of stuff, I hope, kind of puts together some world building and made for a decent little story.